There are moments in life that feel small when they happen. A comment at lunch, a glance across the table, the way someone says your name like they're already tired of you. And then later, when you're alone and the air is too quiet, you realize that moment wasn't small at all. It was a warning. I was sitting in a booth at Maggio's on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of place with red vinyl seats and laminated menus that smell faintly like marinara sauce. My son Daniel had suggested we meet there. Nothing fancy, nothing formal, just lunch with family. Kayla, my daughter-in-law, sat across from me with her phone face down on the table, and her expression somewhere between bored and irritated. Daniel was beside her, focused on his chicken parmesan like it required his full attention. The kids were at school. It was just the three of us. Kayla leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, and looked at me like I'd interrupted something important. "Patricia," she said, not unkindly but not warmly either, "we need to talk about expectations." I set my fork down carefully. "Okay. You keep asking Daniel for help," she continued, her voice measured. "Little things. Can he check the furnace? Can he look at the roof? Can he deal with Richard's insurance paperwork?" I nodded slowly. He offered. "Right," Kayla said, tilting her head, "but we have our own lives, our own responsibilities, and I think—" She paused, glancing at Daniel, who still hadn't looked up. "I think it's time you stop relying on us." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. "Stop relying on us." She said it loud enough that the server refilling water glasses 2 booths over glanced in our direction. I felt my face get warm, but I kept my voice even. "Of course, you're right." Daniel finally looked up, but only at his plate. His jaw worked as he chewed, and I watched him for a moment, waiting for him to say something, anything. He didn't. Kayla smiled then, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "I knew you'd understand. You're always so reasonable." I nodded again, swallowing the tightness in my throat. We finished lunch in near silence. I paid the bill because I always do, and when we stood to leave, I grabbed my purse and slid out of the booth. That's when it happened. Kayla brushed past me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something sharp and floral. She leaned in just slightly, her voice soft and casual, almost playful. "Don't bother checking your accounts tonight," she said, "it'll just upset you." Then she walked toward the exit, heels clicking on the tile, Daniel trailing behind her with a takeout bag in his hand. I stood there, purse hanging from my shoulder, frozen in place. The server asked if I was okay. I smiled at her, the way I've smiled my whole life when I need to hold myself together. "I'm fine, thank you." But I wasn't fine, because that line, that throwaway comment Kayla tossed over her shoulder like it meant nothing, told me everything. If there's one thing you don't say to a woman my age, a woman who spent decades balancing a household budget down to the penny, it's, "Don't check your accounts." That's the kind of line you say when you know what someone is going to find. I drove home through Raleigh with my hand steady on the wheel and my mind running in circles. The air conditioning hummed, the radio played something forgettable. Outside, the world looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but something inside me had shifted. You know that feeling when someone says something and your whole body knows it's wrong, even before your brain catches up. When every instinct you've honed over decades suddenly stands at attention, I've learned to trust that feeling. If you've ever had a moment like that, when you just knew something wasn't right, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you're settling in to hear how this plays out, do me a favor and tap that like button. Share this if you know someone who needs to hear it. Because what I'm about to tell you, what I found when I finally looked at those numbers, it's something every person managing their own accounts needs to know. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, listening to the quiet. My house looked the same. The lawn Richard used to mow every Saturday, now handled by a neighbor's teenager. The front porch where we used to sit with coffee on Sunday mornings. Everything looked normal. But Kayla's words played on a loop in my head. "Don't bother checking your accounts tonight. It'll just upset you." That wasn't cruelty. That was confidence. I walked inside, fed my cat, poured a glass of water I didn't drink, and sat down at the desk in my living room. My husband Richard had been gone from this house for 8 months. Not gone from my life, but gone in the way illness steals someone's independence. A stroke in March, rehab in Durham. Then a longer stay in a skilled nursing facility when his right side didn't come back the way we prayed it would. Some days, Richard was sharp, making jokes with the nurses, asking me about the neighbors. Other days he drifted in and out like a radio that wouldn't hold a signal. My world had narrowed into medication schedules, insurance codes, therapy appointments, and making sure a man I'd been married to for 46 years had clean shirts and someone who spoke to him kindly at dinner. I had become, without choosing it, the person who handled everything. That included the money. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim afternoon light filtering through the curtains. I didn't rush, I didn't panic. I just logged into my bank account and looked at the numbers. And what I saw made my stomach drop in a way I hadn't felt since the night Richard collapsed in our kitchen, and I knew, before the ambulance even arrived, that life was about to change. Only this time, the danger wasn't medical, it was deliberate. I didn't start with my main bank account. When you've handled money as long as I have, you learn that the first signs of trouble show up in the small places. Credit cards, subscriptions, the little charges that slide under your attention until suddenly they add up to something bigger. I clicked into my credit card statement first. Everything looked normal at first glance. Grocery store on Monday, pharmacy on Wednesday. Gas station twice last week. Then I saw it. A charge for $1 from something called VF Services. Another $1 charge from a string of letters that didn't spell anything. KZMR, validation. My finger hovered over the mouse. Those weren't real companies. Those were test charges. The kind of charge someone runs when they're checking to see if a card weaks before they use it for something bigger. I kept scrolling. There it was, a subscription charge. $9.99 to something called Stream Media Plus. I'd never signed up for Stream Media Plus. I didn't even know what it was. My heartbeat stayed steady, but my hands felt cold. I opened a new tab and logged into my main checking account. The page loaded slowly, the little circle spinning in the center of the screen. When it finally appeared, I had to read the number twice. My balance was lower than it should be. Not dramatically. Not enough to trigger an overdraft, but wrong. I scrolled down to recent transactions, and there it was, sitting in the pending section like it had every right to be there. Transfer, $4,800, outgoing. Destination, Harbor Ridge Management LLC. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Then I blinked and looked again. It was still there. I clicked on the transaction details, my stomach tightening. The screen refreshed. Authorized by secondary user, D. Mercer. D. Mercer. Kayla's last name. I sat very still. No tears, no gasp. Just a quiet, cold understanding, settling into my chest like winter air. I opened my savings account. The balance was lower there too. Not empty, not enough to cause alarm if you weren't looking closely. But chipped away, like someone had been skimming. Small amounts. $50 here. $120 there. Spread out over weeks. My throat felt tight. I opened my brokerage account next, the one Richard and I had built together over decades. The safe account. The one I would never touch unless it was an emergency. A sell order had been placed on one of my steadier holdings, the kind of investment you don't sell because it's your safety net. Order status, pending. Timestamp, that afternoon. Right around the time we were finishing lunch at Maggio's. My hand went to my mouth. I heard Kayla's voice again, clear as if she were standing beside me. Don't bother checking your accounts tonight. It'll just upset you. She knew, which meant this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion or a misunderstanding. This was planned. I pulled my phone from my pocket with shaking fingers and opened the banking app. I went straight to the profile settings, the part most people never look at, because everything works fine until it doesn't. That's when I saw the second blow. My contact email had been changed. Not to something random, not to a scammer overseas. To an address I recognized. First initial, last name, a number at the end. The same number I'd used when I helped Daniel set up his college account 20 years ago. It was Daniel's old email. My stomach turned. I clicked into notification settings, already knowing what I would find. Text alerts, off. Email alerts, off. Push notifications, off. Every single alarm I'd set up to keep track of my money had been turned off. I hadn't done that. I would never do that. Someone had gone into my account, turned off every warning, changed my contact information, and then started moving money. Quietly, carefully. Like they'd done this before. I sat back in my chair, the room tilting slightly. This wasn't a sudden theft. This wasn't someone breaking in and grabbing what they could. This was someone stepping into my life like they owned it. Turning off the alarms before taking what they wanted, and they'd done it while I was sitting across from them at lunch, smiling and apologizing for asking too much. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't text Kayla. I didn't do what a younger version of myself might have done. The panicked confrontation that gives someone time to delete messages, hide evidence, rewrite the story. Instead, I did something I've learned after 70 years on this earth. I got very, very calm. I picked up my phone and dialed my bank's fraud line. A recorded voice asked me to press 1, then 2, then wait. I waited. When an agent finally answered, her voice was pleasant and professional. "Thank you for calling. How can I help you today?" I took a slow breath. "My name is Patricia Maltby," I said, my voice steady. "I believe someone has added themselves as a secondary user on my accounts without my permission, and I need to lock everything down right now." There was a pause. "Ma'am," the agent said, her tone shifting. "Can you tell me what makes you think that?" "Because I'm looking at transactions I didn't authorize," I said, "and the person who made them told me not to check my accounts tonight." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm going to freeze all outgoing transfers immediately," she said. "Your debit card may not work for a short period. Is that acceptable?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "Freeze everything." I watched my laptop screen as she worked. The pending sell order disappeared. The outgoing transfer flipped from processing to review. "Ma'am," the agent said gently, "do you have access to your email? We'll need to send confirmation." "My email was changed without my consent," I said. "Please note that in your report." Silence. Then, "Understood. I'm escalating this to our fraud investigations team. You'll receive a call tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning. Kayla had assumed she had tonight. She thought I'd see the numbers, panic, maybe cry a little, and then by morning she'd have what she needed. But I wasn't giving her tonight. After I hung up, I opened a new browser window and went straight to my credit bureaus. I froze my credit, all 3 bureaus. Then I sat there in the quiet house, hearing Richard's old clock ticking in the hallway, and I understood something else. Kayla hadn't just stolen from me. She'd planted a flag. She was telling me, "This is mine now." And that made it personal. The next morning, I drove to Durham. The rehab facility was an hour away, which meant an hour of silence to think about what I'd found. An hour to decide how much to tell Richard and how much to keep to myself. Because you don't drop a crisis into the lap of a man who's still relearning how to button his own shirt. But Richard has always been able to read me. Not the way Daniel reads me, like a puzzle he's trying to solve so he can win. Richard reads me like weather. Like he knows when a storm is coming, because the air tastes different. I parked in the visitor lot and walked through the automatic doors into the building that smelled like industrial cleaner and reheated food. The receptionist waved me through. I knew the way by now. Richard was sitting in his wheelchair by the window in his room, his right hand resting in his lap, his left hand tapping a slow rhythm on the armrest. When he saw me, his face brightened. "Hey, Pats," he said, his voice warm. I kissed his forehead. "Hi, sweetheart." I pulled a chair close and sat down, taking his left hand in mine. He squeezed gently. For a few minutes, we just sat there. I told him about the weather, about the cat knocking over a plant. Small things, safe things. But Richard kept watching me. Finally, he tilted his head. "You got that tight mouth." I blinked. "What?" "That thing you do," he said, gesturing vaguely with his good hand. "When you're holding something in, your mouth gets tight. What's wrong?" It wasn't a question. I looked down at our hands, his fingers warm against mine. "Something's been happening with the money," I said quietly. "Someone's been moving things around." His brow furrowed. "Who?" I swallowed hard. "Kayla's name showed up on my account," I said. "And there are transfers I didn't make." Richard went very still. "How much?" he asked. "Enough," I said. He stared at me for a long moment, then his jaw tightened. "Daniel know about this?" I think so, I said. Richard's eyes closed briefly, and when he opened them again, there was something fierce in them. Something I hadn't seen since before the stroke. I told you, he said, voice low. I told you they were up to something. I frowned. What do you mean? Richard shifted in his chair, leaning forward slightly. They've been coming here. Daniel and Kayla. Separately sometimes. Together, other times. I know, I said. I thought that was good. I thought they were checking on you. They were. Richard said. But not the way you think. He pointed toward the small dresser by his bed. Open the top drawer. I stood and crossed the room, pulling open the drawer. Inside were a few folded shirts, socks, a book Rachel had brought him. Under the book, Richard said. I lifted the book and found a stack of papers, folded and wrinkled like they'd been handled too many times. I pulled them out and unfolded the first page. Power of attorney forms. My heart sank. They brought these? I asked. 3 times, Richard said. First time, Kayla said it was just in case, to make things easier for you. Said you were overwhelmed and this would help. I looked at the signature line. It was blank. I didn't sign, Richard said. Told her I needed to talk to you first. She got quiet, real quiet. Then she said you didn't need to know yet because it would just stress you out. My stomach turned. What happened the second time? I asked. Daniel came alone. Richard said. He sat right where you're sitting and told me Mom needed help, that I should trust him, that signing the forms was the right thing to do. But you didn't, I said. No, Richard said firmly, because something didn't sit right. If it was really about helping you, why wouldn't they just ask you? I sat back down, holding the papers in my lap. What about the third time? I asked. Richard's face darkened. That was 2 weeks ago. Kayla came with a notary, a woman I'd never seen before. They walked in like it was already decided. Kayla said, we're just finishing up some paperwork for Patricia. What did you do? I told them no, Richard said, flat out. Said I wasn't signing anything without talking to you. The notary looked uncomfortable and left. Kayla stayed. She leaned in real close and said, Richard, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Then what? I asked. Richard's voice dropped. Then she said, we'll handle it another way. The room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning unit in the corner. Can I see your phone? I asked. Richard nodded toward the nightstand. It's there. I stopped answering when they started texting late at night. I picked up his phone and opened the messages. There were dozens from Daniel. Short ones. Pressuring ones. Dad. Just sign the forms. It's easier this way. Mom doesn't need to know yet. We'll tell her when it's done. You're being stubborn. This is for her own good. I scrolled further. Then I found the messages from Kayla. Richard, stop making this difficult. We're doing this with or without you. If you won't cooperate, we'll find another way. You know we will. The last message was from 5 days ago. Enjoy your visit with Patricia. It might be the last time things feel normal. My hands shook. Patricia, Richard said softly. What are they doing? I looked up at him, and for the first time since this started, I felt the full weight of it. They're not just taking money, I said. They're trying to take control. Richard reached for my hand again, his grip surprisingly strong. Then stop them, he said. Don't let them do this to you. I folded the power of attorney forms and slipped them into my purse along with Richard's phone. I won't, I said, and I meant it, because now I had something more than stolen money and disabled alerts. I had proof of intent, and that changed everything. I didn't go straight home from Durham. Instead, I sat in the parking lot of the rehab facility for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, thinking about what Richard had told me. They were pressuring him, trying to get him to sign documents behind my back, and when he refused, Kayla had said they'd find another way. Another way. That's what I was looking at now. The transfers, the changed email, the disabled alerts. This wasn't improvised. This was planned. I pulled out my phone and called Rachel. My daughter lives 3 hours away in Richmond, Virginia. She's a financial analyst. The kind of person who reads contracts for fun and spots problems 3 steps ahead. When she answered, I could hear traffic in the background. Mom, she said, everything okay? No, I said. I need your help. There was a pause. Then her voice shifted. What happened? I told her everything. The lunch, Kayla's comment, the transfers, Richard's unsigned forms, the texts on his phone. Rachel didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm coming to Raleigh. I'll be there tonight." "Rachel, you don't have to." "Mom," she said firmly. "I'm coming." And that was that. Rachel arrived at my house just after 8 that evening. She walked in with a laptop bag over her shoulder, and a look on her face that reminded me of the time she was 12 and confronted a teacher who'd graded her essay unfairly. Calm, focused, ready. She hugged me, set her bag down, and said, "Show me everything." We sat at the dining room table, the one Richard built 30 years ago, and I spread out the papers. Bank statements, Richard's phone with the screenshots I'd taken, the unsigned power of attorney forms, my own phone with the banking app still open. Rachel pulled out a yellow legal pad and drew a line down the center. On one side, she wrote facts. On the other side, timeline. "Okay," she said, pen poised. "When was the last time your accounts looked normal?" I thought back. 3 months ago. I checked everything after I paid Richard's first month at the facility. Everything balanced. Rachel wrote that down. "And when did you first notice something off?" "Last night," I said. "But the small charges started showing up maybe 6 weeks ago." She nodded. "So, somewhere between 3 months ago and 6 weeks ago, someone got access." "Kayla," I said. Rachel held up a hand. "We'll get there. First, let's figure out how." She opened her laptop and pulled up a screen I didn't recognize. "Your bank requires 2-factor authentication for adding secondary users, right?" "I think so," I said. Rachel clicked through a few pages. "Okay, so to add herself, Kayla would have needed access to either your phone or your email. And to change your email, she'd need access to your phone, which means..." She stopped, looking at me. "She had my phone," I said quietly. Rachel leaned forward. "When?" I closed my eyes. Replaying the lunch at Maggio's, there had been a moment right after we sat down when Kayla had asked to see a photo of Richard I'd mentioned. I handed her my phone. She'd smiled, scrolled through a few pictures, then said she wanted to take a photo of the 3 of us. She'd stood up, held my phone out, taken the picture, and I hadn't thought anything of it. "At lunch," I said, opening my eyes. She asked to see photos of Richard. I gave her my phone. Rachel's jaw tightened. "How long did she have it?" "Maybe 5 minutes," I said. She took a picture, handed it back. Rachel wrote that down. 5 minutes is enough. If she knew your passcode, she could add herself as a user, change your email, disable notifications, all of it. "She knows my passcode," I said, feeling sick. "I told Daniel years ago when he was helping me set up the phone. It's my birthday and Richard's birthday combined." Rachel nodded slowly. "She didn't need to hack you, Mom. You trusted them. They used that." The words hung in the air. I looked down at the table, at all the papers spread out like evidence of my own foolishness. "I should have seen this coming," I said. "No," Rachel said sharply. "You shouldn't have had to. Normal people don't expect their family to rob them." She tapped her pen on the legal pad. "But now that we know what happened, we need to know what they're planning next." "What do you mean?" I asked. Rachel pulled up the bank statement on her laptop. "Look at the pattern. Small charges first, testing, then bigger transfers, then an attempted sale of your investments. This isn't just theft. This is preparation." "For what?" Rachel pointed to the name on the transfer. "Harbor Ridge Management. That's a leasing company. Kayla's not just skimming money for bills. She's setting something up. A lease, a rental property, something that requires a security deposit and first month's rent." I stared at the screen. "Why would she need that?" I asked. Rachel met my eyes. "Because she's planning an exit. We're setting up something separate. Either way, she's building a life funded by your accounts." The room felt colder suddenly. "So what do we do?" I asked. Rachel closed her laptop and looked at me carefully. "We don't confront her yet. If we do, she'll delete everything, claim it was a misunderstanding, maybe even say you gave permission and forgot." "But I didn't," I said. "I know," Rachel said. "But right now, it's your word against hers. We need more." "More what?" Rachel leaned back in her chair. "More proof, more pattern, more evidence of intent, right now." "She thinks you haven't noticed. Let's keep it that way." "You want me to just let her keep trying?" I asked. "No," Rachel said. I want you to watch her. Let her think she's getting away with it. And when she reaches again, we'll be ready. I looked at my daughter, at the fierce determination in her eyes, and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't alone in this, and I wasn't going to be a victim. Okay, I said. What do we do first? Rachel picked up her pen again. First, we document everything. Every login attempt, every transaction, every text message. We build a timeline so tight that no lawyer can argue it away. She looked up. And second, we set a trap. The call from the bank's fraud investigation team came 2 days later. I was in the kitchen making coffee when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Ms. Maltby, a woman's voice said. This is Linda Gray from the Fraud Investigations Unit. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I set down my coffee mug. Yes. I've been reviewing the case you reported, she said. And I wanted to give you an update on what we found. Rachel was at the table with her laptop open, and when she saw my face, she closed it and gave me her full attention. The attempted transfer you flagged, Linda continued, was to an account registered under Harbor Ridge Management LLC. We contacted them directly, and they confirmed it's a property leasing company based in Cary. A leasing company, I repeated. Yes, Linda said. They manage residential rentals, apartments mostly. The transfer you stopped was for a security deposit and first month's rent. My stomach tightened. For what property? I can't share specifics without a subpoena, Linda said carefully, but I can tell you that the application on file matches the name of the secondary user who attempted the transfer, Kayla Mercer. Rachel's eyes widened. So she was trying to rent a place, I said slowly, using my money. It appears that way, Linda said. The timing suggests the transfer was meant to secure a lease. When it was blocked, the leasing office contacted the applicant to let them know the payment failed. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What did she tell them? According to their records, Linda said, she said there was a banking error and she'd resubmit payment another way. Rachel stood up and came closer, listening. Ms. Maltby, Linda continued, I want you to understand something. This kind of pattern, testing charges followed by larger transfers tied to a specific purchase, suggests premeditation. This wasn't a one-time mistake. I know, I said. Linda's voice softened. We're building a case file. If you decide to pursue this legally, you'll have documentation. But in the meantime, I strongly recommend you do not engage directly with the person involved. Let us handle communication. Understood, I said. After I hung up, I looked at Rachel. She's renting an apartment, I said. Rachel sat back down, her mind clearly racing. In Cary, that's what, 30 minutes from here? About that, I said. Rachel opened her laptop again and typed something. Harbor Ridge Management, let me see what I can find. She scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward me. Here, they have a leasing office on Walnut Street. Open Tuesday through Saturday. I stared at the address. What are you thinking? Rachel asked. I didn't answer right away. I was thinking about Kayla at lunch, leaning back in her chair like she owned the room, about the confidence in her voice when she told me not to check my accounts. She wasn't just taking money for bills. She was building an escape route. I want to see it, I said finally. Rachel looked at me carefully. See what? The leasing office, I said. I want to see if she's still trying. Rachel hesitated. Mom, the bank said not to engage. I'm not going to engage, I said. I just want to see. Rachel studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. But we're doing this smart. We watch, we don't approach, we don't confront. Agreed, I said. The next afternoon, Rachel and I drove to Cary. The leasing office for Harbor Ridge Management was in a newer development off the main road. The kind of place with fresh landscaping and a sign that looked like it cost more than most people's cars. Rachel parked across the street, in a strip mall lot, where we had a clear view of the entrance. Now we wait, she said. I nodded, my hands folded in my lap. We sat there for almost an hour. A few people came and went. A couple looking at floor plans. A maintenance worker carrying a toolbox. No one I recognized. I was starting to think we'd wasted the trip when a car pulled into the lot. A silver sedan. My heart jumped. That's her car, I said quietly. Rachel leaned forward. You're sure? I'm sure. We watched as Kayla got out, wearing sunglasses and carrying a large purse. She walked toward the leasing office with the kind of casual confidence that made my jaw tighten. She disappeared inside. "What do we do?" I asked. "We wait," Rachel said, "and we see what she comes out with." 15 minutes passed. 20. I kept my eyes on the door, my pulse steady but insistent. Finally, the door opened. Kayla stepped out, and this time she wasn't alone. A woman in business clothes walked beside her, gesturing toward a building at the far end of the complex. Kayla nodded, smiled, said something I couldn't hear. The woman handed her a folder. Then she handed her keys. "Keys." Rachel inhaled sharply. "Did you see that?" "I saw it," I said. Kayla shook the woman's hand, turned, and walked back to her car. She opened the door, tossed the folder and keys onto the passenger seat, and drove away. We sat in silence for a moment. "She got a lease," Rachel said finally. "She actually got a lease." I stared at the spot where Kayla's car had been, trying to process what I'd just seen. "How?" I asked. "The bank blocked the transfer." Rachel frowned. "She must have paid another way. Cash, another account, maybe Daniel's." I felt something twist in my chest. This wasn't about helping with Richard's medical bills. This wasn't about being overwhelmed by expenses. This was deliberate. Kayla was setting up a separate life, a separate space, funded by money she'd stolen from me. And she'd done it with the same ease she'd shown at lunch when she told me to stop relying on them. "Mom," Rachel said softly, "this isn't just theft." "I know," I said. Rachel turned to me. "This is control. She's not taking money because she needs it. She's taking it because she can, because she thinks you won't stop her." I looked at my daughter, at the fierce protectiveness in her eyes, and I felt something harden inside me. "She's wrong," I said. Rachel nodded. "So what do we do?" I thought about the keys Kayla had just been handed, the folder with lease paperwork, the confidence in every step she took. "We let her keep thinking she's won," I said. "And we make sure every single move she makes from here gets documented." Rachel's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "And then?" "And then," I said, "we show her what happens when you underestimate a woman who's been keeping the books for 50 years. 3 days after we saw Kayla at the leasing office, Linda Gray called me again. "Ms. Maltby," she said, her tone more serious than before, "I need to update you on something we found in the access logs." I was sitting in my living room with Rachel, who'd decided to stay through the weekend. I put the phone on speaker. "What did you find?" I asked. "The account access attempts," Linda said carefully, "aren't just coming from one device. We trace login activity to 2 separate devices. One is registered to Kayla Mercer, but the other?" She paused. "The other is linked to a phone number registered under Daniel Mercer's name." The room went quiet. Rachel's face hardened. I felt something sink in my chest. "You're saying Daniel accessed my accounts too?" I said slowly. "The device attempted logins multiple times over the past 2 months," Linda confirmed. "Some were successful. Others triggered security prompts that were cleared using the backup email we discussed. The one that was changed without your knowledge." I closed my eyes. "Daniel. My son." "Miss Maltby," Linda said gently, "I know this is difficult, but it's important you understand the scope of what's happening here. This isn't just one person acting alone." "I understand," I said, though my voice sounded far away. After I hung up, Rachel reached over and squeezed my hand. "Mom," she said softly. "I knew," I said. "Part of me knew, but hearing it confirmed." I couldn't finish the sentence. Rachel nodded. "He let it happen. That's what this means. Even if Kayla started it, he knew, and he helped." I thought about Daniel at lunch, sitting beside Kayla, staring at his plate, jaw working as he chewed. Never looking up, never speaking. I'd thought it was weakness, but it wasn't. It was permission. That evening, Daniel called. I stared at his name on my phone screen for 3 rings before I answered. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice warm and easy, like nothing had happened. Like we were still the people we used to be. "Daniel," I said. "I was just thinking about you," he continued, the words coming too smooth, too rehearsed. "I know things have been tense since lunch. Kayla feels bad about what she said. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. I didn't respond. Anyway," he went on, filling the silence, "I wanted to check in, see how you're doing. How's Dad?" "He's fine," I said. "Good, that's good." He paused. "Listen, I was thinking, you've got a lot on your plate right now. Bills, medical stuff, keeping track of everything. I know it's a lot. It is, I said carefully. So I had an idea, Daniel said, his tone brightening like he'd just solved a problem. What if I helped you organize everything? Bills, accounts, all of it. I could set up a system, make it easier for you. There it was, the offer, wrapped in concern, delivered with the kind of casual warmth that would have sounded genuine if I didn't already know what he'd been doing. You want access to my accounts, I said. No, Daniel said quickly. Not access, just, oversight, so you don't have to worry about it all alone. I looked at Rachel, who was watching me intently. Daniel, I said slowly, when did you last check my accounts? There was a pause, just a fraction of a second too long. What do you mean? He asked. I mean exactly what I said, I replied. When was the last time you looked at my bank accounts? I haven't, he said. Why would I? You handle all that. The lie came so easily. So you haven't logged in recently, I said. To check balances. To see transactions. Mom, what's going on? Daniel asked, his voice shifting, a note of something almost like worry creeping in. Did something happen? I'm asking you a question, I said. Have you accessed my accounts? Another pause. Not recently, he said finally. Maybe a while back when you asked me to check something. I don't remember exactly. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Could picture him standing somewhere, running his hand through his hair, the way he always did when he was caught. Daniel, I said quietly, do you know what Harbor Ridge Management is? The silence that followed was different, heavier. I don't think so, he said. Why? Because someone tried to transfer almost $5,000 from my account to them, I said. And that someone used access that required a device linked to your phone number. I heard him swallow. Mom, I think there's been some kind of mistake. He said, his voice rising slightly. Maybe someone got hold of my information. Identity theft happens all the time. Does it? I said flatly. Yes, he said, gaining confidence now. That's probably what this is. You should report it to the bank. I can help you file a claim. I already did, I said, and they've been very helpful. Daniel went quiet. Look, he said after a moment, his tone shifting again, softer now, almost pleading. I don't know what's going on, but whatever it is, we can figure it out together. You don't need to handle this alone. I'm not alone, I said. Then let me help, he said. I'm your son. And there it was, the card he thought would work. The one he'd played my whole life when things got complicated. I'm your son. As if that erased everything. As if that made it impossible for me to see what was right in front of me. Daniel, I said, my voice steady. Did you know Kayla added herself to my accounts? What? No. I mean, she mentioned something about wanting to help, but did you know she changed my email? I interrupted. He hesitated. Mom, you're confused. Kayla wouldn't. Did you know she turned off my alerts so I wouldn't see the transactions? Silence. Daniel, I said, my voice dropping lower. At lunch, when Kayla told me to stop relying on you, you didn't say a word. You sat there. You ate your food. You didn't look at me once. I was just trying to keep the peace, he said weakly. No, I said. You were letting her say what you were both thinking. I heard him exhale shakily. Mom, please, he said. This is getting out of hand. Can we just sit down and talk, face to face? We will, I said, when the time is right. What does that mean? He asked, a note of panic creeping in now. It means, I said slowly, that I'm not the confused old woman you've been counting on. I hung up before he could respond. Rachel was staring at me, something like pride in her eyes. You okay? She asked. I set the phone down on the table and took a slow breath. No, I said honestly. But I will be. Because now I knew the truth. Daniel hadn't been silent at lunch because he was uncomfortable. He'd been silent because he already knew what Kayla was doing, and he decided I was worth less than whatever they thought they needed. That knowledge hurt in a way theft never could. But it also set me free. The morning after I hung up on Daniel, Linda Gray called with a proposal. Ms. Maltby, she said, I've been consulting with our security team, and we have an idea. It's a little unconventional, but it might give us the evidence we need to build a stronger case. I was standing in my kitchen, watching the sun come through the window. Rachel was at the table with her coffee, listening. What kind of idea? I asked. We want to set up what we call a monitored account, Linda explained. It would look like a regular savings account linked to your primary checking. We'd seed it with enough money to make it worth targeting. But every transaction would be flagged in real time, and we have a complete audit trail. You want to bait them? I said. In a controlled way, yes, Linda said. If someone attempts to access it, we'll know immediately. And more importantly, we'll have documentation that can't be disputed. Rachel leaned forward, nodding slowly. What would I have to do? I asked. Very little, Linda said. We set it up on our end. It appears in your account summary like any other savings account, and then you mention it. Mention it how? Casually, Linda said. The way you might mention any good news, an insurance reimbursement, a refund, something that sounds legitimate and time-sensitive. I thought about that. About dropping information like a coin into a well and waiting to see if anyone reached for it. And if they try to take it, I asked. We stop the transaction immediately, Linda said. But we'll have proof of intent. Proof that this isn't a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. It's a pattern. I looked at Rachel, who met my eyes and nodded once. Okay, I said, let's do it. By that afternoon, the account was live. I could see it on my banking app. A new savings account labeled Emergency Fund. Balance, $8,000. It looked real. It felt real. And to anyone watching my accounts, it would seem like money I just received. Now I needed to make sure the right people knew about it. I opened the family group chat on my phone, the one Daniel had set up years ago for coordinating visits and sharing updates about Richard. It had been quiet since the lunch at Maggio's. No one had posted anything. I took a breath and typed. Good news. Got a call from the insurance company today. They're reimbursing some of Richard's earlier medical expenses. Should hit the account any day now. Finally, a break. I stared at the message for a moment before hitting send. It felt wrong, like I was lying. But I reminded myself that the money in that account was real. The lie was in why I was mentioning it. The message went through. I watched the screen. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then I saw it. Read receipts. Daniel had seen it. So had Kayla. Neither of them responded. I set my phone down and walked into the living room where Rachel was working on her laptop. It's done, I said. Rachel looked up. How do you feel? Like I'm setting a trap for my own son, I said quietly. Rachel closed her laptop. Mom, you're not setting a trap. You're giving them a choice. They can leave it alone and prove they've stopped. Or they can reach for it and prove they never intended to stop. And if they don't take the bait? I asked. Then we have other evidence, Rachel said. But my guess? They will. I wanted to argue. Part of me wanted to believe that Daniel would see that message and feel shame, that he'd realize what he'd been doing and stop. But the truth was simpler and harder. People who steal from you once don't usually stop because you gave them another opportunity. They stop when they can't anymore. You know, I need to pause here for a second. I know some of you watching this have been through something similar. Maybe not exactly the same, but close enough that it stings. If that's you, I want you to drop a comment. Tell me what happened. Tell me how you handled it. And if you're still figuring it out, that's okay too. Sometimes just saying it out loud helps. And while you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to take a turn that I promise you won't want to miss. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I went about my routine, fed the cat, checked on Richard, made phone calls to his doctors, folded laundry. But underneath it all, I was waiting. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Every time I checked the banking app, I held my breath. Rachel stayed close, working from my dining room table, her laptop always open, always ready. On the 3rd day, I got a text from Daniel. Hey Mom, just checking in. How are you? I stared at the message. It was so normal, so casual, like he hadn't spent the last week lying to me. I typed back. I'm fine, busy with Richard's appointments. Good, he replied. Let me know if you need anything. I didn't respond. An hour later, Kayla posted in the group chat. So glad to hear about the insurance refund, Patricia. That must be such a relief. My stomach tightened. She was acknowledging it, making it known she'd seen the message. I typed back, yes, it'll help with the next few months of care. Kayla replied with a thumbs up emoji. Rachel came into the room, looking at her phone. Did you see that? I saw it, I said. She's circling, Rachel said. Figuring out how to get to it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the moment at lunch when Kayla had told me not to check my accounts. The smugness in her voice, the certainty. She'd thought I was too old, too overwhelmed, too trusting to notice. And for a while, that had been enough. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd spent 70 years learning how to balance budgets, stretch dollars, and keep a household running when the numbers didn't want to cooperate. I knew how money moved. I knew what normal looked like. And I knew what theft looked like too. At 2 a.m, I got up and checked my phone. No alerts. The emergency fund account was untouched. I went back to bed and lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle. Somewhere out there, Kayla was looking at that number. $8,000, sitting in an account she thought she still had access to. And she was deciding. The question wasn't if she would try. And when she did, I'd be ready. It happened on a Thursday morning. I was at the kitchen table sorting through medical bills when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my bank's main number. I answered immediately. Hello? Ms. Maltby, this is Linda Gray. Are you somewhere you can talk? My heart jumped. Yes. We had activity on the monitored account, she said, her voice calm but urgent. Someone just attempted a transfer. I gripped the phone tighter. $7,200, Linda said. Destination, Harbor Ridge Management. The same place. The same leasing company. When? I asked. 3 minutes ago, Linda said. The transaction was flagged immediately and blocked before processing. The person who initiated it won't know it failed yet. They'll think it went through. I stood up, my legs suddenly unsteady. Who initiated it? I asked. Though I already knew, the access came from the secondary user account, Linda said. Kayla Mercer. She used the same credentials she's used before. Rachel appeared in the doorway, alerted by something in my face. Ms. Maltby, Linda continued. This is the evidence we needed. This wasn't exploratory. This was a deliberate attempt to transfer a significant amount to a known recipient. I'm escalating this to law enforcement right now. What happens next? I asked. A detective from the Financial Crimes Unit will contact you within the hour, Linda said. They'll want a formal statement. Everything you've documented, everything we've tracked, it all becomes part of an official investigation now. I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been soft and uncertain, hardening into clarity. Thank you, I said. Ms. Maltby, Linda said, her voice gentler now. I want you to know, you did the right thing. A lot of people in your situation would have let this go. Would have convinced themselves it was family business, not crime. But what's happening to you is theft. And you deserve protection. After I hung up, I looked at Rachel. She tried, I said. Kayla tried to take it. Rachel's face was grim but unsurprised. How much? $7,000, I said. Almost everything in that account. Rachel shook her head. She couldn't help herself. I sat back down at the table, my hands folded in front of me. For weeks I'd been reacting, discovering, scrambling to understand what was being done to me. But now, something had changed. I wasn't begging to be respected. I wasn't hoping Daniel would wake up and realize what he'd allowed. I was building a record that couldn't be argued away. 40 minutes later, my phone rang again. Ms. Maltby, a woman's voice said. This is Detective Ramona Sinclair, with the Financial Crimes Division. Do you have time to speak with me? Yes, I said. I've been briefed by your bank, Detective Sinclair said. I understand there's been ongoing, unauthorized access to your accounts, and this morning there was an attempted transfer. Is that correct? Yes, I said. I'd like to meet with you in person to take a formal statement, she said. Would this afternoon work? It would, I said. Good. I'll come to you. Does 2 o'clock give you enough time? Yes, I said. Thank you. When I hung up, Rachel was watching me carefully. You okay? She asked. I thought about that question. Was I okay? My son had helped his wife steal from me. They'd pressured Richard in a rehab facility. They'd turned off my alerts, changed my email, and systematically drained my accounts while sitting across from me at lunch and telling me to stop relying on them. No, I wasn't okay. But I was something else. I was clear. I'm ready, I said. Detective Sinclair arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. She was younger than I expected. Maybe 40, with short dark hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen worse, but took every case seriously anyway. She sat at my dining room table with a tablet and a notepad, and she listened as I walked her through everything. The lunch, the comment, the discovery, Richard's unsigned forms, the texts on his phone, the leasing office, Daniel's phone call, the attempted transfer that morning. She didn't interrupt. She just nodded and took notes. When I finished, she looked up. "Miss Maltby," she said, "how long have you known something was wrong?" 2 weeks, I said. "Since the night of the lunch. And in that time, have you confronted either Kayla or Daniel directly about the theft?" "No," I said. "I called Daniel once, but I didn't accuse him. I asked questions. He lied." Detective Sinclair nodded. "Good. That's actually helpful. It means they don't know you're building a case. They think they're still operating undetected." She tapped her tablet. "The bank has provided us with access logs, transaction records, and device information. We've also requested leasing records from Harbor Ridge Management. Those will show if there's a connection between the attempted transfers and any lease activity under Kayla Mercer's name." "There is," Rachel said. "We saw her at the leasing office. She got keys." Detective Sinclair looked at Rachel. "Can you verify that?" "Yes," Rachel said. "We were there. We saw her." Detective Sinclair made a note. "That helps establish intent. This isn't about confusion or miscommunication. This is about deliberately using someone else's funds for personal benefit." She looked back at me. "Ms. Maltby, I need to prepare you for what comes next. When we confront suspects in financial crimes cases, they almost always claim the victim gave permission. They'll say you're confused, that you told them they could access the accounts, that this is a family misunderstanding." "I didn't give permission," I said firmly. "I believe you," Detective Sinclair said, "but we need to make sure the evidence speaks for itself. Changed emails, disabled alerts, unsigned power of attorney forms, that all points to deception, not permission." She closed her tablet. "Here's what I recommend. We're going to continue gathering documentation. Once we have everything, I'll contact Kayla Mercer for an interview. She has the right to bring an attorney, but the goal is to get her explanation on record." "When will that happen?" I asked. "Soon," Detective Sinclair said. "Within the next few days. And Miss Maltby, I want you to be prepared. When people realize they've been caught, they react. Sometimes with anger, sometimes with blame. You might hear things that hurt." I nodded slowly. "But remember," Detective Sinclair continued, "your job isn't to defend yourself. Your job is to let the evidence do the talking." She stood, gathering her things. "One more thing," she said. "If either Kayla or Daniel contacts you in the meantime, don't engage beyond what's necessary. And if they say anything about the accounts, document it. Save texts, record calls if your state allows it. Everything helps." After she left, I sat at the table for a long time. Rachel sat beside me, quiet. "You doing okay?" she asked finally. I looked at my hands, at the wedding ring I'd worn for 46 years, at the lines and age spots that told the story of a life spent working, caring, holding things together. "I spent my whole life making sure my family was taken care of," I said. "And the moment I needed them to treat me with basic respect, they saw an opportunity instead." Rachel squeezed my hand. "But I'm not the one who should feel ashamed," I said, looking up. "They are. And for the first time since this started, I felt something close to peace. Not because it was over, but because I'd stopped asking for permission to protect myself." Detective Sinclair called me back 2 days later. "Ms. Maltby," she said, "I've compiled the initial evidence package, and I need you to come down to the station to review everything and sign off on your official statement. Can you do that tomorrow morning?" "Yes," I said. "Bring anything you have that we haven't seen yet," she said. "Photos, texts, documents, anything that helps establish timeline or intent." The next morning, Rachel drove me to the police station. It was a low brick building on the edge of downtown, the kind of place you pass every day without really noticing. Inside, Detective Sinclair met us in a small conference room with a table, 4 chairs, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. She spread documents across the table like pieces of a puzzle. Bank statements, access logs, screenshots of my account settings showing the changed email and disabled alerts, Richard's phone records, the unsigned power of attorney forms. This is what we have. Walk me through it one more time, slowly. I want to make sure we're not missing anything. I sat down and started from the beginning. The lunch. Kayla's comment. The discovery that night. Each transaction, each login attempt, each small theft that added up to something bigger. Detective Sinclair took notes, occasionally stopping me to ask for clarification. When you found the changed email, she said, did you recognize the address immediately? It was Daniel's old email, the one I helped him set up for college. She made a note. So they used something personal, something that connected directly back to your family. Yes, I said. She tapped her pen on the table. Here's what I need you to understand. When we bring Kayla in for questioning, her attorney is going to argue that you gave permission, that you're elderly, maybe confused, maybe you told them they could help and forgot. I'm not confused. I know that, Detective Sinclair said. But they'll try to make it look that way, so we need to be ready. She pulled out a printed timeline. This is what defeats that argument. Look at this. The email was changed on a Tuesday afternoon, the same day you had lunch with them. That evening, alerts were disabled. The next morning, the first test charge appeared. She looked at me. If you had given permission, why would they need to disable your alerts? Why would they change your contact email? Those are the actions of someone hiding something, not someone helping. Rachel leaned forward. What about the power of attorney forms? Those are critical, Detective Sinclair said. Richard's testimony that they pressured him, that they tried to get him to sign without telling Patricia, that shows a pattern. They wanted legal access, but when they couldn't get it, they just took it anyway. She flipped to another page. And the attempted transfer this morning, that seals it. They didn't ask, they didn't notify you. They just tried to take $7,000 and funnel it to the same leasing company where Kayla has an active lease. I stared at the documents, at the evidence of everything I'd suspected laid out in black and white. What happens now? I asked. Detective Sinclair leaned back in her chair. I've submitted a request for the full leasing file from Harbor Ridge. Once we have that, we'll have a direct connection between your money and Kayla's personal expenses. Then I'll bring her in for an interview. Will I be there? I asked. No, she said. Not for the interview. But you have the right to know what she says. And depending on what comes out of that conversation, we may move forward with formal charges. She looked at me carefully. Ms. Maltby, I need to ask you something. What do you want out of this? I thought about that question. What did I want? Did I want Kayla arrested? Did I want Daniel to face consequences? Did I want my money back? I want them to stop, I said finally. I want them to understand that I'm not someone they can just take from. And I want to make sure they can never do this to anyone else. Detective Sinclair nodded. Then we're on the right track. She gathered the documents and slid them into a folder. I'll call you when I have the leasing records. In the meantime, if anything else happens, contact me immediately. As Rachel and I walked out of the station, I felt something settle in my chest. For weeks, I'd been reacting, scrambling, trying to figure out what was happening and how to stop it. But now I wasn't reacting anymore. I was acting, and I had one more move to make. That evening, I sat in my living room and thought about Kayla at lunch, leaning back in her chair like she owned the room. The way she'd looked at me with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. She'd performed power in that moment, made sure I felt small, made sure I knew my place, and Daniel had sat there and let her. Detective Sinclair would interview Kayla in a sterile room at the police station. She'd ask questions. Kayla would have a lawyer. She'd be prepared. But that wasn't enough for me. I didn't just want Kayla to answer questions in a room where she could control the narrative. I wanted the truth delivered in the place where she'd humiliated me. I wanted her to face what she'd done in front of the person she'd dismissed. I picked up my phone and texted Kayla. I'd like to talk. Can we meet for lunch? Just family. I think we need to clear the air. I stared at the message for a moment before hitting send. Rachel walked into the room and saw my face. What did you just do? I invited them to lunch, I said. Rachel's eyes widened. Mom, the detective said not to engage. I'm not engaging, I said calmly. I'm giving them one last chance to be honest. My phone buzzed. Kayla had replied. That sounds great. How about Saturday? Our place. I smiled. Of course she wanted it at her house, where she felt comfortable, where she had control. Perfect, I typed back. See you then. Rachel sat down beside me. What are you planning? I looked at my daughter, at the concern and curiosity in her eyes. I'm planning, I said, to let them think they've won. right up until the moment they realize they haven't. Saturday came with clear skies and the kind of mild weather that makes everything feel deceptively normal. Rachel offered to come with me, but I told her no. "Is this something I need to do alone?" I said. She didn't argue, she just hugged me and said, "Call me if you need me." I drove to Kayla and Daniel's house with a folder on the passenger seat. Inside were copies of everything. Bank statements, access logs, screenshots, the timeline Rachel and I had built, Richard's texts, everything except the one piece of information they didn't know I had yet, the detectives. Kayla and Daniel lived in a newer subdivision with wide streets and houses that all looked vaguely similar. Their home was a 2-story, with beige siding and a front porch decorated with potted plants. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, looking at the house. Somewhere inside, Kayla was setting the table, making sure everything looked perfect, preparing to perform the role of the gracious host who just wants to move past unpleasantness. I picked up the folder and walked to the front door. Kayla answered before I could knock, smiling wide. "Patricia, come in, come in." She was wearing a cream-colored sweater and dark jeans, her hair pulled back, looking relaxed and welcoming. I stepped inside. The house smelled like roasted chicken and something sweet baking in the oven. The dining table was set with cloth napkins and water glasses already filled. Daniel appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. When he saw me, his smile looked strained. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Hello, Daniel," I said. Their 2 kids, my grandchildren, were nowhere to be seen. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "Playdate," Kayla said easily. "We thought it would be better if it was just us, so we can really talk." I nodded. "That's probably wise." Kayla gestured toward the table. "Why don't we sit? Lunch is almost ready." I took a seat at the table, placing my folder beside my plate. Kayla glanced at it, but didn't ask. Daniel sat across from me, his hands folded on the table. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well. Kayla brought out a platter of chicken, then a bowl of salad, moving with practiced ease. "I'm so glad we're doing this," she said as she sat down. "I think we all just needed some space after that last lunch." Emotions were high. Things were said. She looked at me with an expression that might have been apologetic if it reached her eyes. "I know I came across harsh," she continued. "And I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. That wasn't my intention." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." Daniel relaxed slightly, like he thought this was going to be easy. Kayla served the food, passing plates with a bright smile. "So Patricia, how's Richard doing? Any improvements?" "He's stable," I said, "getting stronger every day." "That's wonderful," Kayla said. "You've been handling so much. We really do admire how you've managed everything." The words were kind, the tone was warm, but I heard what was underneath. She was resetting the narrative, making herself the reasonable one, the one who cared. We ate for a few minutes in silence, then Kayla set down her fork and folded her hands. "Patricia, I want to talk about moving forward. I think we can all agree that family is what matters most. And sometimes in families, there are misunderstandings. But that doesn't mean we stop caring about each other." "Misunderstandings?" I repeated quietly. "Yes," Kayla said. "I think maybe there's been some confusion about finances, about who's helping with what. And I want to clear that up so there's no weirdness between us." Daniel shifted in his seat, but said nothing. I looked at him. "Daniel, do you have anything you want to say?" He glanced at Kayla, then back at me. "I just want us to be okay, Mom. I don't like this tension." "Neither do I said. I reached for the folder beside my plate and opened it. Kayla's smile flickered. "What's that?" she asked lightly. "Information," I said. I pulled out the first document. A bank statement with highlighted lines showing the unauthorized transactions. I placed it on the table between us. "This is from my checking account," I said. "You can see here, a transfer of $4,800 to Harbor Ridge Management. Authorized by a secondary user. That user is you, Kayla." Kayla's face went pale. "Patricia, I think you're confused." "I'm not confused," I said calmly. I pulled out the next document. The access log. "This shows every time someone logged into my account over the past 2 months," I said. "The timestamps, the device information, 2 devices, One registered to your name, one registered to Daniel's phone number. Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I looked at him directly. You accessed my accounts, Daniel, multiple times. Mom, I can explain, he started. Don't, I said, holding up a hand. Not yet. I pulled out the screenshots, showing my changed email and disabled alerts. My contact information was changed without my knowledge, I said. My text alerts were turned off. My email was switched to Daniel's old address, the one I helped him set up 20 years ago. Kayla pushed her chair back slightly. This is ridiculous. You're making this sound like theft, I said, meeting her eyes. Because that's what it is. The room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I pulled out the timeline Rachel and I had created. Tuesday afternoon, I had lunch with you both, I said, running my finger down the page. That same afternoon, my email was changed. That evening, my alerts were disabled. The next morning, test charges appeared on my credit card, and 2 days after that, the first large transfer was attempted. I looked up at Kayla. All of this happened after you held my phone at lunch. After you asked to see photos of Richard and took your time giving it back. Kayla's jaw tightened. You're twisting this. Am I? I asked. Then explain the attempted transfer from 3 days ago, $7,000, to the same leasing company? For the apartment you're renting in Cary. Kayla's eyes widened. Daniel made a choking sound. Kayla, what is she talking about? I turned to my son. She used my money to secure a lease. Rachel and I watched her pick up the keys. Daniel stared at Kayla like he was seeing her for the first time. That's not, Kayla started, but her voice faltered. I leaned forward, keeping my tone steady. Daniel, I need you to answer one question, and I need you to answer it honestly. He looked at me, his face gray. Did you know Kayla was accessing my accounts? I asked. The silence stretched. Daniel's hands trembled on the table. Did you know she changed my email? I asked again. Did you know she turned off my alerts? His eyes filled with tears. Mom, yes or no? I said. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Yes. The word landed like a stone. Kayla turned to him, her expression sharp. Daniel, I knew, he said, louder now, his voice cracking. I knew she was doing it. She said we were drowning. She said the credit cards were maxed out. She said if we didn't get ahead of it, we'd lose everything. So you let her steal from me, I said. It wasn't supposed to be stealing, Daniel said desperately. We were going to pay you back, once we got stable, once things settled. When? I asked. When were you going to tell me? He didn't answer. I looked at Kayla, whose face had shifted from defensive to something colder. You think you're so smart, don't you? She said quietly. Coming here with your little folder, making your case. I don't think I'm smart, I said. I know I'm right. Kayla leaned forward. And what exactly do you think happens now, Patricia? You ruin your son's life? You destroy your relationship with your grandchildren? For what, a few $1,000s? For my dignity, I said. Kayla laughed, sharp and bitter. Dignity. You're 70 years old. You're overwhelmed. Everyone feels sorry for you. But you think refusing help makes you strong? I held her gaze. I didn't refuse help. I refused theft. Daniel dropped his face into his hands. And then, from outside, I heard it. Car doors closing. Footsteps on the walkway. The doorbell rang. 3 firm chimes. Kayla froze. Kayla stared at the door. Daniel lifted his head from his hands, his face confused. I stood up, smoothing my cardigan. I should get that, I said quietly. Kayla's voice came out too high. We're not expecting anyone. I know, I said. I walked to the front door and opened it. Detective Sinclair stood on the porch with another officer in plain clothes, both holding badges. Miss Maltby, Detective Sinclair said. Good afternoon. Behind me, I heard Kayla's breath catch. Detective Sinclair's eyes moved past my shoulder into the house, landing on Kayla. Miss Mercer? She asked. Kayla stood frozen at the table, her face drained of color. Yes? I'm Detective Sinclair with the Financial Crimes Division, she said, stepping into the entryway. I need to speak with you about attempted unauthorized transfers from Miss Maltby's bank accounts. The air in the room shifted. Daniel stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. What? Detective Sinclair's partner, a tall man with graying hair, moved to stand beside her. Ms. Mercer. Detective Sinclair continued, her tone professional and measured. We also have documentation from Harbor Ridge Management. Records show a lease application in your name associated with the attempted transfers we've been investigating. Kayla's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Rachel appeared in the doorway behind the detectives, her expression calm, but her presence deliberate. She met my eyes and nodded once. Then she turned to Kayla. We saw you at the leasing office, Rachel said, her voice steady. 3 days ago. You walked out with a folder and keys in your hand. Kayla's face went from pale to red. You're following me? We were protecting our mother, Rachel said simply. Daniel turned to Kayla, his voice rising. You got an apartment? Kayla whipped around to face him. Don't you dare start. You said we needed a backup plan. A backup plan isn't stealing from my mother, Daniel said, his voice breaking. I thought you were paying bills. I thought you were handling credit cards. I was, Kayla snapped. And everything else you were too weak to deal with. The words hung in the air like smoke. Detective Sinclair cleared her throat. Ms. Mercer, I'd like to conduct this interview at the station. You have the right to have an attorney present. Kayla's eyes darted between me, the detective, and Daniel. This is insane. Patricia, tell them. Tell them this is a family matter. I looked at her for a long moment. It stopped being a family matter, I said quietly. The moment you decided my bank account was yours. Kayla's voice rose. I was helping. You were overwhelmed. Richard's care was expensive. We were stepping in. Rachel stepped forward. Then why rent yourself an apartment in Cary? How does that help with Richard's care? Kayla's jaw clenched. That's none of your business. It is when you're using my mother's money, Rachel said. Detective Sinclair pulled out a small notebook. Ms. Mercer, the lease records we obtained show the security deposit and first month's rent totaling $7,400. The attempted transfers from Ms. Maltby's accounts match that amount exactly. Kayla's hands balled into fists. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like I committed some crime. You did, I said. The room went silent. Kayla turned to me, her eyes blazing. You called the police on your own family? Do you have any idea what this does? What this means for Daniel, for your grandchildren? I met her gaze without flinching. I gave you every opportunity to stop. I watched you reach into that monitored account 3 days ago and try to take $7,000. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask permission. You just took it. Kayla's breath came faster. Because you would have said no. Because you're selfish and you hoard your money while everyone around you struggles. I paid for Richard's care, I said, my voice rising slightly. I paid for insurance. I paid for therapy. I kept our lives running while you sat at lunch and told me to stop relying on you. Kayla's face twisted. You think you're so dignified, so put together. But you're just a bitter old woman who can't stand the idea that someone else has control. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You're right about one thing, I said. I can't stand the idea of someone else having control over my life. Especially someone who thinks my age makes me easy. Kayla opened her mouth to respond, but Daniel cut her off. Stop, he said, his voice raw. Just stop. Everyone turned to look at him. He was staring at Kayla, tears streaming down his face. You told me it was temporary. You said we'd pay her back. You said she wouldn't even notice. Daniel, Kayla said, her tone shifting, softening. Don't do this. You lied to me, Daniel said. About all of it. I did what I had to do, Kayla said, because you wouldn't. Daniel flinched like she'd slapped him. Then he turned to me, his voice breaking completely. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I knew something was wrong, but I told myself it was okay, that we'd fix it, that you'd understand. I looked at my son, at the man who'd sat at lunch and refused to meet my eyes while his wife humiliated me. You let her, I said quietly. That's what hurts the most. You let her do this because it was easier than standing up. Daniel's shoulders shook. I know. Detective Sinclair stepped forward. Ms. Mercer, we need to go. You can contact your attorney from the station. Kayla grabbed her phone from the table, her hands shaking. This isn't over, Patricia. You think you've won something, but all you've done is destroy this family. I shook my head slowly. I didn't destroy this family, you did. The moment you decided I was worth less than the money in my account. Detective Sinclair gestured toward the door. Ms. Mercer. Kayla walked toward the door, her head high, but I could see the panic in her eyes. As she passed me, she stopped. You'll regret this, she said quietly. I looked at her, at the woman who'd smiled at me across the lunch table while planning to rob me blind, and I felt nothing but certainty. No, I said, I won't. Detective Sinclair and her partner escorted Kayla out. Through the window, I watched them walk her to their car. Watched her get in the back seat. Watched the car pull away. Rachel stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. Daniel stood alone in the middle of the dining room, looking at the table still set with our unfinished lunch, and I saw the exact moment he understood what his silence had cost him. Not just money, not just trust, everything. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Kayla hired an attorney within 24 hours. The attorney sent letters, made phone calls, tried to frame everything as a misunderstanding between family members who loved each other. But the evidence didn't care about love. The bank records spoke for themselves. The access logs, the changed email, the disabled alerts, the attempted transfers to a leasing company where Kayla had secured an apartment using money that wasn't hers. Detective Sinclair kept me updated, told me what I needed to know, without overwhelming me with details I didn't need. The case moved forward slowly, the way these things do, but I didn't wait for it to resolve before I started rebuilding. I opened new accounts at a different bank, set up protections that required in-person verification for any changes, created separate accounts for different purposes so that if something ever went wrong again, it would be contained. I changed every password, every security question, every piece of information someone could use to pretend they were me. And I wrote down rules, not guidelines, not suggestions, rules. No one gets access to my accounts. No one makes financial decisions on my behalf without written consent reviewed by an attorney. No one pressures Richard for signatures or paperwork without me present. And if someone in my family needs help, they ask, with honesty, with respect, not with theft disguised as concern. 2 weeks after the detectives came to the house, Daniel showed up on my porch. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden hour light that makes everything look softer than it is. He stood there, with his hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched, like a boy who'd been sent to apologize. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I looked at him for a long moment. Part of me wanted to say no, to close the door and let him stand there with the weight of what he'd done. But another part of me, the part that had raised him and loved him and watched him grow into someone I didn't always recognize, wanted to hear what he had to say. I opened the door wider. "Come in." We sat in the living room, not close, not like we used to, but across from each other like people trying to figure out if there was anything left to save. Daniel stared at his hands. "I don't know how to start." "Start with the truth," I said. He nodded slowly. "I knew what Kayla was doing. Not all of it, not the apartment, but I knew she was moving money around. She told me you wouldn't notice, that it was small amounts, that we'd pay you back. And you believed her," I said. "I wanted to," Daniel said, his voice thick, "because if I believed her, I didn't have to admit what we were really doing." He looked up, his eyes red. "I've been drowning, Mom, the credit cards, the bills. Everything Kayla said we handled together, she just kept spending. And I kept quiet because I didn't want to admit I couldn't control it." "So you let her control me instead," I said. Daniel flinched. "Yes," the word hummed between us. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I let you down in the worst possible way, and I don't know how to fix it." I took a slow breath. "You can't fix it," I said. "Not the way you're thinking." Daniel's face crumpled. "But," I continued, "you can decide who you're going to be from here." He looked at me, waiting. "If you want any kind of relationship with me going forward," I said, "it has to be on new terms. No access to my money, No asking for loans. No trying to manage my life because you think I can't handle it. I understand, Daniel said. I'm not finished, I said. You're going to get help. Real help. Financial counseling, therapy, whatever it takes to stop making choices out of fear. And you're going to be accountable, not to me, to yourself. Daniel nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. And one more thing, I said. You will never ever let anyone talk to me the way Kayla did at that lunch. Not your wife, not your friends, not anyone. I won't, Daniel said. I swear. I looked at my son and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Remorse. Real remorse. Not the kind that's performed to get out of trouble. The kind that comes from finally understanding the size of what you've lost. Then we start there, I said. Daniel stood up, hesitated, then asked quietly, Can I hug you? I stood too. Yes. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, and I felt him shake with the kind of crying that comes from deep places. I held him, not because everything was fixed, but because he was still my son. And because holding space for someone's consequences is sometimes the hardest and most important kind of love. Before we go any further, I want to say something. If you've made it this far in this story, thank you, really. I know these stories aren't always easy to hear, but sometimes we need to see ourselves in someone else's experience to know we're not alone. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of something you've been through, or something you're dealing with right now, please share it. Leave a comment, tell me what you think, and make sure you subscribe, because stories like this one, stories about taking back your power, they matter. And I'm not done telling them. A month later, Richard moved to a new facility. Rachel found it after weeks of research, a place that specialized in stroke recovery and treated patients like people, not problems. The first time I wheeled Richard into the courtyard, he looked up at the sky and smiled. This is better, he said. It is, I agreed. He squeezed my hand with his good hand. How are you doing, Pats? I thought about that question, really thought about it. A few months ago, I would have said fine out of habit, would have brushed past the question because I didn't want to burden anyone. But now I answered honestly. I'm tired, I said. But I'm okay. Richard nodded, studying my face. That girl thought she could talk to you any way she wanted. I know, I said. And you didn't yell, Richard said, admiration in his voice. You didn't beg, you just handled it. I smiled. I checked the numbers. Richard laughed, the sound warm and familiar. That's my girl. We sat there for a while, watching the late afternoon sun filter through the trees. And for the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. I thought about Kayla at that lunch, leaning back in her chair, telling me to stop relying on them. Thought about Daniel, keeping his eyes down, refusing to look at me. They'd tried to put me in my place. They'd assumed my age meant I was too tired, too overwhelmed, too trusting to notice what they were doing. But they were wrong, because the moment I sat down at my desk that night and opened my laptop, the moment I saw those numbers and decided to act instead of accept, everything changed. I stopped being the version of myself they thought they could control, and I became the woman I'd always been underneath. The one who balances accounts, the one who asks hard questions, the one who doesn't apologize for protecting what's hers. People ask me now, what happened after that lunch? They want to know if Kayla faced charges, if Daniel and I reconciled, if everything worked out in some neat, satisfying way. And I tell them the truth. The legal process is slow. Relationships take time to rebuild, if they rebuild at all. Some things don't get wrapped up in a bow. But here's what did happen. I stopped waiting for permission to protect myself. I stopped making excuses for people who chose convenience over respect. And I stopped relying on anyone who thought my dignity was negotiable. That night, when Kayla told me not to check my accounts, she thought she was giving me an order. But what she actually gave me was a choice. And I chose myself. Every single time.